My sister publicly humiliates my son for fun, so I won't attend her wedding. But now her fiancé also has doubts about whether he will attend. Almost a year ago, I reconnected with my sister, whom I hadn't seen for nearly a decade. Although I was the one who made the effort to rebuild our relationship, now I wonder if it was the right decision. She hasn't changed at all. Her current behavior is the same as what caused our relationship to break in the first place. So, as you can imagine, I find myself in a huge dilemma. Like everyone else I know, they have biased opinions. I thought it would be best to ask online. I don't think anyone will really take the time to read this, but if you do, thank you for reading and I hope you can give me an unbiased view. To give you some context, my name is Raquel, and the sister I'm talking about is Han, my blood sister, raised under the same roof. I know it sounds strange to clarify, but you'll soon understand why it's hard to believe we're related. I'm currently a single mother living with my son, Tom. I have a good job and do the best I can to make Tom happy. He's now 7 years old, so the usual mom things. It was when I became a mom that I started thinking about reconnecting with Han, but ironically, now my son is the reason I regret that decision. Let's start from the beginning. Han is 4 years younger than me. My mom told me that when she was born, I was very happy. I had always wanted a younger sister since I was little. I took care of her, and my mom, who spoiled her a little more because they looked alike, told me how close we were. We grew up inseparable. Honestly, I don't even know when things started to change, but at some point, Han changed. She became someone who found it pathetic to spend time with her older sister. I was always kind to her and never raised my voice, but little by little she started insulting me and making me feel less every time I tried to talk to her. Our parents were too busy to notice, and once when my mom saw her mocking me, she did nothing. I hated how Han treated me, and I couldn't understand why she started making fun of me, getting me into trouble. It was as if she had lost all sense of guilt or empathy. I tried to explain to her that her new friends were probably influencing her, but eventually I realized that she was the one leading that behavior. I don't want to talk too much about the past because it's painful, but you should know that Han was terrible to me, and I felt powerless. She even stole my boyfriend and spent my savings on herself. When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I spoke to my parents. They ignored me, saying, "She's your younger sister." It's normal for her to make mistakes. They made it clear that they would never support me in this, so when I went to college, I hardly ever came home. It hurt my dad, but my mom and Han hardly cared, which was fine with me. Going home only meant more arguments between Han and me, or my mom siding with her. After college, I got an internship offer in another state and accepted it, though not before suffering another attack from her, this time calling my internship place, pretending to be me. In short, I was able to explain the situation, and they seemed to understand, so I didn't lose that opportunity. It didn't end up being such a bad thing. Maybe I was lucky because the person who gave me the opportunity had a sister with entitlement, so she completely understood me. I wonder if she's written her story here. She's told me some things, but I don't think I've ever read it. Still, when I found out that Han had tried to sabotage my opportunity, I was furious. My parents begged me to forgive her, calling it a mistake, but I told them I had had enough. I had given her countless chances to change, but she was incapable of doing so. So I cut all contact with her while she kept living at home. I hardly called, and when my mom asked me to help her, I refused. I wanted nothing to do with her. My parents kept trying to reconcile us, but Han didn't care, and even told me that I could do whatever I wanted when I told her I no longer considered her my sister. She simply replied that she hadn't considered me her sister in a long time anyway. That essentially broke our relationship, and I decided that she didn't deserve to be in my life. A few months later, I got a job in the new state and moved there permanently, hardly ever going back home. Han also moved away, and we hardly ever crossed paths. Mom sometimes asked me to call her, but I never did, and neither did she. Later, I met someone, got married, and that's another story, but it doesn't matter now. He's my ex-husband and is no longer part of my life. Anyway, before the divorce, I got pregnant and gave birth to my son Tom. I didn't invite Han to the wedding, which upset my parents, and she didn't come around when Tom was born. But after his birth, I started to feel guilty for having pushed her away. And here I am now, questioning myself. I was sure a few years ago. I divorced my husband who didn't want to get involved in our son's life. That's when I started to miss my family and thought about Han, but I didn't call her. By the beginning of this year, I had finished moving back to my hometown, and I felt that maybe it was time to reconnect. I called her, and she seemed different, happy to hear from me. We apologized to each other, talked about superficial things, and stayed in touch online for a while. A few months ago, I was offered the chance to transfer back to my old city, and I took it. I wanted to be close to my family, and my parents wanted to have their grandson nearby. When I moved, Han was already engaged to her longtime boyfriend Brad and planned to marry by the end of the year. She worked on rebuilding our relationship, trying to put everything that had happened in the past behind us. At first, she didn't really connect with my son, and it seemed like she was annoyed by having him around. But little by little, he seemed to grow on her, or so I thought. Looking back now, it turns out she was just pretending. As the wedding plans were coming together, I was happy for her and glad she had found someone as kind as Brad. Then, about 2 months ago, Han surprised me by asking if I could book and pay for the wedding venue. She explained that she had handled everything else and needed help only with this, saying it could be my gift to her. She promised she would be incredibly grateful. For a moment, I wondered if she had been behaving well with me all this time just to get something out of me, but I pushed that thought aside, feeling that it was too cynical. After a few days, I realized that booking the venue was feasible, and I told her I'd be happy to help. A week later, I found a beautiful place and even made the reservation. She was thrilled, and everything seemed to be going well. I felt really happy that we were finally rebuilding our bond. Then, she did something that destroyed everything. A few days ago, I was overwhelmed with work, so my mom took Tom shopping with Han and her friends. While they were out, Tom started asking Han questions, picking things out and asking for something to eat. Han became irritated, and when Tom kept asking questions, she snapped. She yelled at him, terrified him, and then, in front of her friends, started making fun of him, telling them that he sometimes wets the bed and is afraid of the dark. She even went as far as saying that his dad left him because he was too annoying, and that I would probably leave him too. As you can imagine, this humiliated and traumatized my son. He started crying uncontrollably, while Han laughed at him as he sobbed. Eventually, my mom decided to take him home. When they arrived, Tom was still crying so much that I had to leave work to be with him. At first, my mom tried to downplay it, saying that Han got upset and scared him, but I could tell something else had happened. I focused on comforting Tom, but the next day, I learned the horrible truth. I couldn't understand why my sister would act that way. Even if she was upset with him, why take it out on an innocent child? I confronted my mom for allowing this to happen and then went to see Han. She minimized it, saying that Tom was annoying and that she had fun telling him those things. I told her it wasn't a joke and demanded that she apologize to Tom in front of everyone. Although I knew an apology wouldn't fix the damage, I felt it was the least she could do. She refused, insisting that she hadn't done anything wrong. This was exactly the kind of behavior that had made me cut all contact with her in the first place. As she kept refusing, I felt more and more frustrated until I just left. Now I'm left questioning what to do. I can't just let it go. If she had gone after me, that would be one thing, but doing that to my son is completely different. So, here I am, looking for ideas, something that isn't illegal. I know there are many trolls who often suggest those kinds of things, but I want to let my sister know that you don't mess with people like this. Update 1. A few days have passed and things haven't gone as I expected. First, let me thank everyone who took the time to read my long message and gave me suggestions. Believe me, I'm very grateful that you took the time to help me. I read everything, and only then did I decide to do something. After much thinking and reading your suggestions, I decided I needed to be mature and talk to her. Many of you also said that maybe she was under a lot of pressure and that something might have happened with her fiancé. I felt that all of this was possible since my sister isn't the type of person who shares things, especially with someone so close. I thought she might be going through something, so, as I already mentioned, I decided to do the right thing and talk to her. I went to see my sister and asked my mom to convince her to spare me 10 minutes of her life to talk to me. Mom was happy to help, as she's also felt a bit responsible for what happened. So later in the afternoon, I met with Han at a nearby cafe where she was shopping and spoke to her alone. From the beginning, she told me that she wasn't going to apologize and that I was wasting my time. Well, I told her to just listen to what I had to say. Then I explained how my ex-husband left me and how it affected my son. It took a lot for me to explain it so she would understand what happened, and for some reason, my son blamed himself. Well, obviously, I couldn't tell her everything or explain too much, so maybe it was my fault that she thought that way, but I made sure to recover slowly. I explained that my son is a sensitive child and that to this day, I've never yelled at him. I told her how much it had hurt him and how it traumatized him. I mentioned that whether it was right or wrong, she also brought up his dad, which made things much, much worse. I explained how difficult it was to comfort him afterward. She simply listened to everything, and at that moment, I thought she had finally understood what she had done, and that what would happen next would be her offering an apology or something like that. Then, with a serious face, she told me that it didn't seem like a big deal to her. She said it was my fault because I was raising a weak child, and that if I wanted my son to grow into a man, I shouldn't pamper him like that. I asked her if she had lost her mind and told her that my son would turn out to be much better than her. Then I told her I was tired of the games and that she needed to apologize. Well, she got angry at me for even trying to make her apologize for something so trivial. She said that she didn't feel bad at all and that she would do it again without thinking if she had the chance. This infuriated me so much that I was afraid I might slap her. I didn't do it. I just left. Now I realize that reconnecting with her was definitely a mistake. I guess I was holding on to nostalgia from the past, when we were kids and got along. That's why I wanted to reconnect with her. Update 2. A week has passed since the last update, and I can't say things have improved. If anything, they've gotten much worse. I wish I had a better update, but I don't. Right now, I'm at a point where I might be cut off from the entire family because of what I did. Let me tell you what happened after my last update. I was still really angry. Angry with myself for trusting my sister and just angry with her for everything she did. For those of you who asked, Tom is fine, he's happy, but I keep him away from my sister and most of the family. One day, after everything happened, my mom called me asking what had happened and why my sister was telling her that I wasn't going to attend. By the way, many of you asked why I didn't talk to my parents when she refused to apologize. Well, let me show you what happens when I complain. I told my mom what happened and explained that my sister was being unfair and cruel. So there was no way I was going to the wedding, especially with my son. She told me I wasn't being understanding and that it was her wedding, so I needed to let it all go. This time, I told her there was no way I could just let things go if my sister couldn't even admit her mistake and apologize. I was done. I told her that even if my sister apologized now, I still wouldn't go to the wedding, and that was final. Even my dad called me, asking me to change my mind, which only made me angrier. I asked my dad if he had called my sister to tell her she needed to apologize to me. He said he hadn't said anything to her. I also received some calls from other family members, all of whom acted like my sister hadn't done anything serious. This made me so mad that a few days later I made a big decision. I regretted reconnecting with her at all, and at this point, I wasn't going to the wedding, no matter what. Then I thought, if I'm not going to the wedding, why should I pay for the venue? I had already forgotten that I had committed to paying. I debated with myself whether backing out and not paying for the venue a month before the wedding was a bad or good decision. Even at that moment, I was thinking about the problems this might cause her and I hesitated. But that hesitation just made me even angrier. So, without thinking more about it, I decided to cancel. The next day I canceled the venue. Later that night, I sent her a message saying that since I wasn't going to the wedding, I was canceling my gift. She immediately called me in a panic, but I ignored the call. After a few hours, both my dad and mom started calling me frantically as well, but I didn't answer. Yesterday, I finally answered my sister's call. She was screaming, asking me what this meant. I told her it was simple. I didn't feel like paying for something I wasn't going to attend, the wedding venue. She said it wasn't fair, and I responded, "Nothing in life is fair, and you just need to accept it." Then I added, "Don't ask me to apologize." She started screaming and losing control, so I just ended the call. I wasn't going to stay on the phone listening to her call me names. Then she went crying to everyone, saying that I was trying to ruin her wedding by canceling the venue at the last minute. Well, you know what? When I told her I didn't care anymore, Mom got angry and told me I had to do what she said. Yes, at this point, my whole family is trying to cut me off, including my parents, unless I either rebook the venue or give my sister the money to book it. I can't believe they're doing this to me, trying to isolate me. Where was all this support when my sister did that to my son? Update 3. A few days have passed since the last update, and after thinking a lot, I ended up telling my sister to go to hell and told my family to do whatever they thought was right. As expected, everyone cut me off, except for one person. Surprisingly, my sister's fiancé, Brad. He called me and told me that what she did was really bad, and she deserved what I did. He apologized, but I told him it wasn't necessary, as in a way I had saved him from marrying such a horrible woman. I asked him if he had canceled the wedding, and he told me he hadn't yet. But after talking to me, he was going to meet with my sister to inform her of his decision not to marry her. As you can imagine, the drama in my family was total, especially for my sister when Brad dropped the bomb. I want to clarify here that when I say my family, I'm referring to my parents, my sister, and some close relatives who are on her side. However, there's another part of the family that doesn't care about the drama, and even some who don't like my sister. So it's not everyone, as I may have implied in other posts. But back to the drama. For a couple of days, everything was quiet. I didn't receive calls or messages, basically because I have them blocked. But it seemed suspicious that they didn't try another way to contact me, not even coming to my house. But none of that happened until I finally ran into my parents and sister at a cafe. I had gone to grab coffee with Tom. Obviously, Tom wasn't having coffee. How foolish I was to think we were going to have a peaceful moment when that was far from happening. All I got was embarrassment because we ended up in a heated argument in that public place. I was facing away from the door, but Tom saw them and said, "Look, Mommy, here come the grandparents." When I turned around, it was too late because they were already on top of me, yelling. Well, to be honest, it was Han who was yelling at me, while my parents yelled at both of us to calm down. The summary of the argument was that my sister was angry with me for telling her fiancé about the little incident, as she called it, with my son. She blamed me for not only leaving her alone, but now also having to pay for a wedding that wasn't going to happen. I don't know why she said she was paying, since as far as I knew, Brad had also contributed. But I guess it was something she said in the heat of the moment. She also told me I was getting back at her for what happened in the past, and because I was an unhappy mother for not having a husband for myself and a father for my son. As she screamed at me, I also yelled back to defend myself while my parents tried to calm us both down. Eventually, I saw that Tom wasn't doing well with all of this. On top of that, we were making a scene at the place, so I grabbed my things, took Tom, and we left. My sister kept yelling at me, but I told her, "Can you shut that big ostrich beak of yours and find yourself a new fiancé? You still have a few days before your wedding, and don't forget to find a place to hold it." With that, I left. And even though she kept screaming and was as red as a tomato, I could still hear her when we had already walked half a block away. I didn't want to keep feeding her ego. She can blame me for whatever she wants, but Brad didn't find out from me about what she did to Tom. I would never have thought to call him because it wasn't my place to say anything. But in a way, I'm glad he found out because he seems to have some decency and understands that making a child suffer, no matter the reason, is wrong. At most, the only person she should be yelling at is herself. Her only chance now is to record a voice message and send it to herself so she can argue with the only person responsible for all of this. Update 4. Well, I just discovered who told Brad everything that happened with my sister and my son. It was my dad, plain and simple. The truth is that after all the drama and accusations against me, I never thought he would be the one to update Brad on everything. But I got another call from Brad recently, and this time he seemed to have some direct questions about the fight we had at the cafe. Obviously, I was surprised that he knew about it, so I curiously asked him how he found out, and that's when he confessed. Just like before, it was my own father who told him everything. It's hard to process that my dad, who has been supporting Han from the start and, in theory, is also upset with me, is the same person leaking the details of this situation to Brad. When I asked Brad why my dad was telling him these things, he just replied that they had a good relationship, and that deep down, my dad knew how difficult Han could be. Apparently, my dad wasn't completely sure that Brad should marry her, since even though she's his daughter, he knows how complicated and problematic she can be. It's ironic because my dad has done everything he can to force me to reconcile with Han, as if she's someone worth keeping close. While I understand a father's desire to protect his daughter, it seems that my dad also has his doubts about the kind of person Han has become. In a way, I think he tried to do something good by keeping Brad informed, but without giving me any direct support. And here I am, taking all the blame while my dad has been secretly sharing the truth with Brad. Brad genuinely feels bad about how I'm being blamed. He told me that he didn't think it was fair that I was carrying the burden of all the conflicts with Han, and that's why he offered to tell Han the truth himself. While I don't have loyalty to my father, I know that whatever Brad tells her will blow up in her face, and at least my dad has tried to do something good here. So I told Brad that he doesn't need to do anything for me, especially if he gets even deeper into all this drama. It doesn't seem fair to him because he's not to blame for my family's mess. Also, I've already left them behind, and I don't need any revenge or sense of justice. I believe in karma, so in this life or the next, my parents and sister will get what they deserve. But Brad said that, anyway, he felt it was the right thing to do. So I don't know what will happen now, but I don't think it'll be anything good for my dad. Update 5. I know I've left you without updates for a while, but after the drama exploded with my father, things calmed down, at least on the surface. My parents seemed to stay together, from what some relatives told me, but things were far from fine. My dad and mom were just constantly fighting, and my sister, to add more tension, stopped talking to him completely. Finally, after months of accumulated tension and fights, my parents decided to get a divorce. As for my sister, things haven't improved much for her. She didn't find a replacement for Brad in time, so she couldn't take advantage of all the money she invested in her wedding. She can't blame me for that. I gave her advice, and she didn't know how to apply it. She had put some of the money, but Brad had also contributed a significant amount. So, it was a lie when she accused me of making her lose all her money. Well, as with everything in her life, it's a lie, manipulation, and a tantrum. With Brad, I've kept in touch, and surprisingly, we've become friends. In the end, it seems like something positive came out of all this drama. I even introduced him to a friend of mine that I've known for years who is 1,000,000 times better of a person than my sister. Not only do they get along well, but he seems genuinely interested in her. It's strange to think that after all this, maybe at some point, I could consider them as part of my family because my friend is almost like a sister to me. After all, it feels amazing to be able to choose your family instead of just settling with the one you were given.